Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to be speaking at this August conference for the second time, and on a subject that complements what I spoke on last year, which was, by the way, on circular economy. It's even more special because we are celebrating the Golden Jubilee of the Club of Rome, 50 years. When I was looking at the title of the plenary, it automatically made me look at the questions that were put to address, from which at the deliberations of the conference today and tomorrow, answers were sought for. I would like to take up question number 1 and 2 for discussion, and addressing these questions with a focus on the urban scene. Since the morning, we have been hearing about the rural and the agriculture and many of these aspects. But ultimately, when we are looking at policies and we are looking at challenges, a great deal is actually in the urban space. Now, whilst looking at the questions, there were some of the key words that emerged and which I thought I would like to share as I have a chat with all of you. Housing for all. It's a common thing that we are hearing today. Of course, the need of the hour. But in all spheres, we are using low-cost housing, housing for all in different contexts. Infrastructure, resource consumption, alternate resources, recycling, the byproducts, and use of technology, and of course, alternative hybrid scenario. Now, of the key words that I have mentioned, I thought I would put them in order to see their interconnect and their interdependence. Now, when you talk about housing for all, infrastructure is a necessary element. To put the infrastructure in place, there will be consumption of resources, and as we all know, it's one of the biggest challenges considering the limitation of the natural resources that we have. So we must look to alternatives to such natural resources. Now the question is, where do we find all these natural resources? The alternatives to the natural resources, that is. So as the speakers before me in the morning and now have spoken about recycling the byproducts of many of the items that we generate as wastes and wasteful expenditure in our daily lives. Now, when we take up the challenges of resource efficiency in infrastructure, the first thing that we need to have a quick look at is the rules that govern the demolition and the construction wastes. And those rules are known as it's very simply known as Construction and Demolition Waste Management Rules 2016. Ms. Chima just spoke about policies, that it should support initiatives, etc. We have many of the rules, and if we were to look at it a little closely, we would find that in all these rules, there are many provisions which are laid out, which actually turns into business opportunities. It turns into good best practices. But the challenge lies in understanding the policies and ethically working towards implementing it. In many instances, I'm not making a sweeping statement, but I'm making a general statement. We have spoken a lot about wastes. I spoke about it last year also. Wastes are handled, of different kinds of wastes, are handled by multiple policies, multiple rules. Is there an interconnect with these policies? Do they contradict each other? Do they complement each other? I think as I would appeal to Club of Rome to take that into consideration, to study the rules in a more holistic manner and find the challenges of lack of coordination or contradictions and address them to take it into a more implementable and sustainable manner so that people do not cut corners when they are trying to implement the rules. Now, if you look at the specific rules of construction and demolition where the waste is generated, we will find that these rules apply to each one of the generators of waste which results from construction and demolition. So it is not, and even of remodeling, of repair, of any civil structure, whether it is individual or organizations or authorities who generate any such waste. Now, when we talk about building materials, we talk about debris, it is generated by multiple agencies and multiple organizations, just as private bodies. There are duties of waste generators. There are duties of local authorities. How many of us know what these duties are? If you don't know it, you will not follow it. And I'm coming down to basics. Now, unless the basics are understood, how on earth are we going to find the alternatives? So, whilst I was perusing these rules, not just for the purpose of this conference, but out of general understanding of these, I found that in the Schedule 2 of Rule 7.3 in the rules, there is a mention of parameters and criteria, and it was quite fascinating because it talks a great deal about landfills, which the first speaker, Mr. Venkateshwaran, has spoke with about the landfills. You brought that out. And I think it's a great talking point when we talk about landfills. Landfills, according to the rules, have been a major source of consumption of materials generated from demolition waste. And I quote, "Use of construction and demolition fines as landfill cover shall be mandatory where such material is available. Fresh soil, that is sweet earth, shall not be used for such places." Now, that led me to talk about a solution which I have been part of, and which I had briefly touched upon last year when I was speaking on circular economy. But I would like, before that, to say that wherever waste is generated, and which we do all the time, resources are created. This is nothing new that I'm saying. Now, when resources are there, our entrepreneurship spirit is ignited amongst many of us. And entrepreneurship is also a business opportunity, which in turn does create job opportunities, not only for the person who's the entrepreneur, but when you scale it up, you automatically create job space. Now, apart from this particular rule, I would not go into details of the others, but I'm going to take up the municipal solid waste rules and the construction rules and combine it to share with you about a solution which was an in-house solution, taking the Devna dumping ground into account and our local municipal corporation of Greater Mumbai into account. The Greater Mumbai Municipal Corporation, by the way, is the richest corporation in our country. And Mumbai, I think, generates a huge amount of waste. The Devna dumping ground has been in the news forever. I don't need to go into details of that. Suffice to say that if one could look at Devna, you don't look at that as a landfill. You actually look at it as a mountain of waste. And that must be the case in many places, but this one strikes out being right in the heart of the city now, because the city boundary of Mumbai has extended beyond the landfill areas. Now, this is an alternate resource material that I'm going to talk about, and which is efficient and which is a very usable product created there. And it touches upon, again, what Mr. Venkateshwaran touched upon, are bricks. So the objective was that how do you process, recycle the waste at the Devna dumping ground. So the idea was to use the decomposed garbage, which officially is termed as municipal solid waste. How many of you know about MSW, as it's called shortly? And I don't mean the very senior people. I'm actually addressing it to the younger people who are sitting here. You produce that waste, so now know it by name, because identity is a great leveler. Because when you know the identity of something, you start to think about it as a solid thing or a liquid. It's an entity that we don't take for granted now. So municipal solid waste is available in huge quantities in the dumping ground. Have any of you visited the Deonar dumping ground, by the way? After today, do go and visit. It will give you such a reality check and a shock that you will start to look at waste in a very different manner. It happened with me, and I know that it has happened with many whom I have sent over time to have a look at the Deonar dumping ground. So going back to the objective of this alternate solution that I was sharing with you, is that to create solid bricks which can be used for construction and other masonry activities from municipal solid waste, which is generated every day by each one of us. This innovative solution, as I mentioned earlier, was an in-house project by a team from the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai. These bricks are structurally as good as the traditional ones, and their production process is far less damaging to the environment. I will tell you shortly why I made this statement. Now, while conventional bricks are manufactured from the fertile topsoils of the agricultural land, the MSW bricks are made from garbage. And this not only reduces the garbage in the landfills, but are most cost-effective, and it is within the city limits. When I first went to see the Deonar dumping ground, it was with the opening of the bhatti, as you call it, when you create the bricks. And the people who were employed to work on these bricks were the tribals in and around Mumbai. Now, when you are creating these bricks, you are generating job opportunities, you are generating resource. Let me just go back to that topic a little later, but let me share the concept with you first. Now, when this bricks project was conceived, they had earlier looked at various other solid waste particles that would come into the dumping ground, which you mentioned. And keeping those aside, for other recycled resources, the attention was drawn to the solid waste which was being created in the earth. So the municipal solid waste dredged out from the composted portion was used for making these bricks. Now, when the degeneration of the garbage happens, the conversion takes usually about 10 years, from 6 to 10 years or more. So as we went along, depending on which items degraded faster, the team found that making bricks out of this degraded material would be a more sustainable method, because the demand will be far more, and that would be within city limits. So these bricks were found to be technically sound. Let me give you some statistics. For manufacturing of 1,000 bricks, about 3 to 3.5 metric tons of decomposed garbage would be consumed. By virtue of using this decomposed garbage from the dumping ground space was created for fresh garbage to come in. Considering the amount of construction activities that are being carried out in the city of Mumbai, there would be a huge amount for the bricks. So when we are looking at any business opportunity, has to balance supply and demand. So considering that the supply of raw material was endless, considering we produce this waste daily, and the demand for construction is so much in urban spaces, and particularly in a city of Mumbai, that it made good business sense. The cost was initially about 1.5 to 4 per brick. But now, if it is scaled up, I understand the cost could be brought down to 1 or 1.20 per brick. Now, that is very, very economical, as I understood from the builder lobby when I was discussing this with them. Now, we wonder why these bricks are not being used. So that brought me to the point that there is obviously something missing if such a low capital resource is available, readily available. Why is it, and employment generation is there, and yet these bricks are not being used? As a matter of fact, the production of these bricks have now been halted. So why, when there is availability of market, what is needed for the production of these bricks? Land for setting up manufacturing and production of the production plant. Various permissions would be needed. Workforce is readily available. But I think something is missing here. We are talking about circular economy, but are we talking about coordinate thinking and working? So there has to be a partnership process which needs to be set up, which I think has also been touched upon my previous speakers, that between those who are producing the brick, which would be the local bodies, the municipalities that is, the state government, the corporate entities, and the developers. Everyone is working in separate spheres. There is a major lack of coordination, of bringing about the various sides of requirement, demand that is, the various sides of production, the generation, all coming together. So if the coordinate thinking is not there, then circular economy to succeed will be a big challenge. Resource efficiency is a much talked about words these days, both are. Alternate resources are also talked about. Let us talk about human behavior. There is a constant challenge to the nature. Innovation is extremely welcome. But do we need to always challenge nature in order to bring about innovation? Mind you, in every aspect, if we look around, nature in its own has created certain environment, certain way of living, certain resources. The smart thing to do is to accept that, work with it, and understand why we need to work with it. Unfortunately, greed and speed, in a hurry, we want to get there, and we lose track of this very golden rule that challenging nature by no means is going to get us at the winning post, because nature will throw it back at us. Every other time, you see places, Mumbai, where we are sitting today, when I came 30 years ago to stay in Mumbai, by its nature being near the sea, you would get a cool breeze and never a hot air as you would find in a city like Delhi. Yet today in Mumbai, we experience hot air. So something is not right somewhere. You are having tsunamis, you're having constant cyclones. Yes, certain things are part of nature. It comes at a certain point of time in the year, etc. But there is an increase, and it would be foolish of us, every one of us, and certainly it's a thought for all of you people who are taking over the world from us, the older generation to the younger, that how we deal with nature and how we use its resources, how we can look to the alternatives, and how we can work in a coordinate manner between the corporates, between the government, with the government. And I say we shouldn't be doing the work of the government. We should be augmenting it and bringing the two together so that we can find sustainable and implementable solutions, which will also create the job opportunities and be possible to live in a much better world, which I think has been used quite frequently. But there appears to be still this challenge and dissatisfaction with our general areas where we live. At the end, I'd like to share a personal experience of a country which has been able to be at one with nature. It's not very far. It's a country that we are very close to, and that is Bhutan. I was there in that country about a few months ago, earlier in the year. And today, when I was coming here, I've been thinking, and in the newspaper of today's DNA, I suddenly see an article saying, "Carbon sink Bhutan counts cost of plans for a green future." When I went to Bhutan, apart from the fact that it's a beautiful jewel, it's a beautiful country, but why is it so beautiful? They have been able, the Bhutanese people have been able to keep a balance between their natural resources and what they want. Now, what they want is to preserve. What they want is to see to it that their country remains carbon negative. So the bottom line is that all of us citizens, as civil society, if we want something very badly, we will get there. But do we want it that badly? What is it that we want? I think that's a question for each one of us to introspect and truthfully answer to ourselves. What is it that we want? When we are able to truthfully answer that, civil society itself will want to measure the natural resources, preserve natural resources, and be content. Because that's what I found. I know that Bhutan is known as the land of happiness. That's happiness quotient which they look at. But what I found was contentment. Their education and healthcare is free. They don't want to live anywhere else. They go out of their country to study, but they want to get back to their country. I think that is where the success lies. That they feel for their country, so they come back to the country, not because somebody else tells us that we should feel that way. But it is a question of personal choice at the end of the day. And if each one of us make that personal choice in sync with nature, fairly sure that we will get there. And I think it's time that we said, give Earth a chance. Thank you very much.